Welcome back, one and all, to another edition of Two Guys Talking About a DBZ Game. Same as last time, I'm Ian, and with me is Niels.
Hey there.
With that out of the way, let's get into things. First, announcements. There has been a deluge of information since the last video we made. The game is coming out on PC, so to all you PC gamers listening, you can get it. Secondly, a network test beta thingy came out, but that will be the main focus of the video. Frieza's race has been confirmed to be selectable. Also, in case we slip up, changelings are the same as Frieza's race. Huzzah, fan terms! Now to start with the beta. Both of us played it, and to start with, we'll go over the experience of making a character. The first thing you see when you're making one is that each race has their own unique bonuses to them. What do you think this means for the game?
Well, it's certainly interesting. I mean, Fancy Star, online, the first one had that, and I didn't really have a problem with that. And I definitely like the fact that there's, variation in the different races. I'm not sure how to feel on the fact that there's a difference between genders, but the fact that Saiyans have like a form of, well, they get stronger when they get back up. That's always nice to have, you know. It's a little detail that makes your Saiyan character feel like a Saiyan character.
On the other hand, you mentioned Fantasy Star, but I'd say a big difference between that game and this one is that's an RPG that has clear classes and roles assigned to them. And this is a fighting game where all the characters should be roughly about equal in order to have it be balanced and fun and everything. With a system like this, you're leaving it open for people to min-max what can be the best race and gender combination and things like that. And with some stuff we'll talk about later, it could potentially get messy with how it's handled. If
That's
the
true, but I suppose most systems have that. So you
eh,
always have the person who tries to min-max his character to the best that it could be.
So it all comes down to a decision also between aesthetics and statistics. So, on one hand, it's always nice when what you do has an impact on your character. Then it feels like your character is more unique outside of just how they look. But on the other hand, if everything is tied to statistics, then you get into, well, I'd like to use this outfit for my character, but the stats on it are so terrible, I'd just be gimping myself horribly to use it. And that's not a feeling you ever want to give someone either. So, it'll come down to how big an impact it actually has on your stats in the end, I think, and what the bonuses are. I think
I,
it's something to keep an eye on.
I think as far as, you know, the as you mentioned, different outfits have different stats to them. You do have like 10 different customizable outfit choices that you have. So you can always have like the outfit that looks good and then have a different outfit for the one that is really powerful. There's enough room for that at least.
Yeah, it's just it can get. I'm just imagining in my head something that's a complete mismatch of items that looks aesthetically just gaudy and horrible, but the stats are really high, so it's good.
You mean like the Reddit spam example?
It's just this. I don't know. It'll matter in the end, but yeah, the we got off topic a little bit, but so getting back to the races, the gender is a little. Yeah, that one's a little more head scratching than the racial ones because, um, I mean, on one hand, making the genders different has some good that we've talked about, but on the other hand, to me, gender is sort of in a in a game like this, gender is really just aesthetic.
I get what you mean. It's the same in a lot of other games as well. Guild Wars, Dungeons and Dragons. Gender doesn't really determine much in terms of stats. But yeah, I the females in this case, they're much more related to Ki, which is I guess what you would standard expect as the difference if you would have difference between them.
Yeah, the female Saiyans recharge ki and guard gauge faster, which in effect is basically the same as saying they can fire off ki easier and are more nimble, but they have less health.
Yep. And
So,
then you have the males, who of course are the big strong guys, and they do more melee damage.
so the other thing that's the big question is what are the other races going to get for their bonuses?
Well, we know what Namex are going to get.
Yeah, they're
Like,
good with health regeneration.
yeah, pretty much. They're more like tanky characters, which is kind of weird because it makes me wonder what are the margins and Frieza's rate.
Well, I would guess Frieza's race is probably going to be good with key attacks. So they'll either be good at
Okay.
spam. They'll either be good at spamming the regular key attacks, or they'll be good at super attacks. That generally is the theme when it comes to Frieza in games. So I'd expect it to carry over into his race.
Yeah.
I'd think a more head scratching one would be the Majins and humans.
For humans, I would say, since it says for Saiyan characters that in general they have low health and high attack power, I would say humans are probably like the middle ground, the all-rounders. But that would really leave still a big, yeah, a lot of doubt about what the margins are going to be like. Because if I were designing this, I would say the margins are the ones who have high defense and they could heal their health easily, which is the thing that Namex are good at.
Yeah, because if there's one thing Boo is known for, it's getting blown apart and not dying.
Exactly.
Namex are a little bit easier to kill.
Of course, they have generation as shown at multiple points, but
Not even close to that amount, though.
no, even if you take Cell into account, it's no.
Yeah. Um. So, yeah, I mean, humans being a general all-around race is definitely a possibility. Although, then that brings up what would be the difference between a human, male and woman? Would it just be? I mean, at that point, the difference between them would be so subtle. If the human race is all around, and you have the gender differences between male and female, it's like male is a little bit higher with attack, and female is a little bit better with ki. You can't make it too extreme, otherwise it would start stepping on the toes of the other races, and
Yeah, I wonder
so
because these Saiyans and the Namex they have like their own special properties in healing items heal more for Namex, and Saiyans they get stronger when they are at low health, and when they get recovered their stats will all rise. So I would assume humans will also get something like that, but
well, not
hmm,
necessarily, because the Saiyan male, okay, that's true with this overall, but the Saiyan male has an effect where his buffs last longer. The Saiyan female doesn't have anything like that at all.
uh, no, you're right. That's she doesn't.
Yeah. She doesn't have a unique effect that's like on top of some special interaction. It's just how her stats work outside of the uh, overall Saiyan race thing. So, not necessarily. I wouldn't say that rules it out, but I will say just it does mean that there doesn't necessarily have to be an extra effect like that for a race.
Maybe they'll just have insane stats. That'd be funny.
That's always possible. Just make them big stat sticks, basically.
Yep.
But okay, so getting off of that, we then come to actually making the character itself. Um, my experience with it was, well, first of all, I'll say this: the editor that we had was clearly more restrictive than the one you'll have in the final game.
That
Uh,
is true. We've seen in the I'm not sure if they were leaked screenshots or just
no,
screenshots, but
they were official screenshots.
okay, yeah, we saw that there's options for body type, your general size. There's even a black character in one of the character concepts, And those are all things that we couldn't do in this version.
Yeah. So, skin color working. There could be an option in the color section of the character creation to change it that just wasn't present here, or it's possible it could be tied to body type. Uh, we don't know at this point, but the option will exist. That much we do know. Um, and yeah, like we said, we saw in the screenshot, which were official screenshots. They were high quality scans of the game that were put out, so I don't think they were leaked at all. I
They
think
didn't look like
they
it,
were
but
put out with the press release when they announced the larger character creation in general, so I'm pretty sure they were official. Which means you wouldn't show the official screenshot if you weren't planning on putting it in. Now, I guess it is theoretically possible they could have been planning on putting it in and then removed it, but I don't think so, because I don't see why you'd do that.
that would be really silly.
I mean, I know there are some features in games that get advertised and they talk about it and then they end up not being able to fit it in, but I don't think that's going to be the case here.
I doubt it.
They might run into some animation problems possibly that could do it, but I think most people would probably say, screw the animation problems, give me my character height. So I think people could live with the, like in Ultimate Tenkaichi, how some of the animations didn't play properly on different character heights.
Ultimate Tenkaichi, that's a while ago, so I really have to dig for that one. But
Well, some of the character things were attacks for characters that weren't in the game, but you had them for your custom character. But the height and size things didn't always match up perfectly, so sometimes it'd be
okay,
like you're swatting at air or something and hitting the target, and it looked awkward, but I think in the end, people could live with that little bit of awkwardness for their character to have that attack or to have the option to change their height and body type.
I know I would.
Yeah, I certainly would too. I mean, I think in general, having it not match up perfectly is well with to be acceptable to have more options for your character. I just think that's what it is. But
Hmm.
uh, for the most part, I was pretty impressed with the character thing. I didn't expect to have an option to like pick your pupils and ears.
Yeah, that was unexpected.
So, not bad.
Not not that there were many options for those,
Well,
but
I think there will be more in the final release.
yeah,
Um,
I'm expecting a few more in the final release at least, because I think uh, what I noticed about that, all at least with the Saiyan male, all of the options for hair and ears, etc., they were all labeled from one to the final number. But for eyes, I believe they were just very strange numbers, like five and three and whatever. They didn't have number one for some reason. So it looks like there will be more options, but
I don't remember the female ones, but I have that video showing right now, so people watching it will know if any of numbers are weird for saying females.
yeah.
I honestly don't remember. It's been a while, and I don't know if I paid enough attention to the numbers like that. So, yeah. Um, but yeah, it was pretty good. I see it as, ultimately being nice. Neither one of us made a Namek. I had a friend I played with who made a Namek, and I saw lots of Nameks, so I can't comment on
Yeah.
how that went exactly, but apparently they have. Oh, how to describe how Nameks look in this game? Well, you have your standard Nameks, and then apparently they have a Cyberman set where you can make them look like a Cyberman.
Well, I've
Uh,
also seen one with, I think, uh,
there's a lot of head fins.
what's yeah, the head fin thing. They have some crazy head options for Namex.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's nice having it. Apparently, Nameks can also just blot out their eyes to be one solid color too. So the amount of red-eyed Nameks wearing black clothing I saw named like Dark Namek was distressing.
It was always fun to just read out names that came by.
The favorite character I saw was a guy named Badman with a pink shirt, and all he did was just stand there showing it off all day long. It's glorious though.
It
Still
takes
not.
all
That is
types.
still not a costume. Despite how many games have come out and how many people have said it, we still haven't got a Super Saiyan Batman yet, and it's very disturbing.
You mean Vegeta's pink Batman shirt from?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If they gave that to him as a costume, he'd be able to transform and everything in it, and it would be glorious.
Oh, that would be
Yes.
great.
Well, no, 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 it wasn't pink. We should probably specify it wasn't pink. It was salmon.
Salmon.
It was salmon because when a man wears a pink shirt, it becomes salmon because that doesn't sound as girly.
Oh, so that's how they hide it.
Actually, I think there is a subtle color difference, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what it is. Anyway, that got off on a weird tangent.
Well, it's about Dragon Ball, so
Ah,
we can nerd out on that.
well, getting on to the other big topic of this, we'll get back. Don't worry, I know we haven't covered everything on character creation, but we'll get to the other stuff later because that all comes, all the clothing options and stuff like that come after you've made it and after you've played a bit. So we're covering that after gameplay, which is what we're going into now. Um, An important detail when you're looking at any gameplay footage from anyone playing this is they never told you what the controls were. You just went down and you had to figure everything out yourself. As soon as you got to a battle, it did not tell you anything. When you loaded
It
it
took me
up,
half. It took me half a day to figure out how to ascend and descend.
especially
It,
descend, we'll get to that one later. So, if it looks like people are sucking in this game, that's probably why. They never told you how to do anything. And that was a rather large oversight on a beta because it's hard to really test the game and the combat and everything if you don't tell people what to do. But anyway, that was just a little bit of a note I wanted to put before we got to the discussion. Uh, Mostly because I think there's a lot of other options in combat that we just never figured out. Other maneuvers and things you can do that weren't as obvious at first, like maybe ways of following up on combos and other things like that that are in the game, but we didn't know about because they didn't tell us. So, in terms of what game this one is most like for gameplay, it's Battle Z. It really is. Uh, you agree with that?
Battle of Z. Well, it's different in a lot of aspects, but if you want something to compare it to,
Yeah, if you wanted to get some idea of what it's like, it's more like Battle of Z than it is Raging Blast. Um, that being said, I know saying it's like Battle of Z is probably causing people to freak out right now, but it is infinitely better than Battle of Z was.
yeah, a lot better. There's a lot more options in what you can do.
Yeah, one of my biggest complaints about Battle of Z, but I never made a review about it, mostly because the game was so uninteresting. But one of the biggest problems I had with it was you had no defensive options in Battle of Z, or at least any of the game felt like telling you existed, and I actually tried. I actually tried to figure out how to, like, teleport counter or put up a barrier or things like that. So, however you do it, because I saw the computer do it, so obviously it's something, unless the computer can cheat. I couldn't figure it out.
They, they did seem to have like a get out of jail free card whenever you ganged up on a single computer.
Yeah, and I could never figure out how to do it. This game, on the other hand, I did figure out how to do it. It's really easy. You just hit X when something's attacking you. I
Yep.
mean, the trick is it's based off of your guard gauge, so you can only do it so many times before you run out, which makes your guard gauge rather precious for keeping yourself alive.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the modern Naruto games with how do they call it evasion in those?
I
The lock
don't know. Yeah.
teleportation thing.
Uh, I don't I don't know the Japanese or English name for it, so.
Yeah,
I actually gave up on those series before the gauge thing existed, so.
from what I've seen, if I mean I've never played any of those games.
Yeah. But if it's like that, it's like that. I don't know from experience, so. Um, so yeah, you actually have defensive options in this game, which mostly stem from your guard gauge. You have a way of doing a teleport counter, which I said is just hitting X and you just appear behind them. The other thing is the game gives you a slot for a defensive skill, and the only thing you can put in that slot is a defensive skill, so you can't even like say I don't want this. So there's quite a few you can get. You can get something that like jumps backwards. You can get something that jumps forward. You get something that like teleports into the air. You get like a super explosive wave. So you have a lot of defensive options it gives you. I mean, you can't use all of those at once, but you can certainly customize how you want your character to be able to react to getting attacked. An important thing I'll mention on the teleport counter is you can only do it to the person you're locked onto. So if someone you're not locked onto starts punching you, you'd have to switch to them before you could do the counter. Which does mean someone sneaking up behind you and punching you is a rather big deal because they can get a few nice hits in before you can react to them.
Yeah, that always seems to be a problem, even with Battle of Z, or especially in Battle of Z, when someone had started attacking you that you weren't locked onto. Yeah, it became kind of a chaos just trying to get a lock onto them and trying to react to the attack.
But I think
Which in this game you
that's
can, at least, but
well, I think here that's what the defensive ability is for, though. If something happens where you can't react really quickly, sorry, you can use your super explosive wave or something to just get rid of them or run away really fast so they can't follow you, and it's just kind of, it's kind of like you said, a get out of jail free card. It is based off of your guard gauge, so you can't just keep spamming it over and over again.
no. You're pretty much one try at it.
Yeah. At this point, I think I should explain the gauges too, since we talked about the guard gauge so much and haven't explained it yet.
Probably
So,
a good idea.
basically, you have three bars: health, self-explanatory; key, self-explanatory; guard gauge, not self-explanatory. The guard gauge is basically something that refills on its own pretty quickly, as long as you're not attacking. If you start attacking, it will stop charging, and that includes if you just start flailing the air helplessly. You don't actually have to hit something, it's just an attack of some sort will cause it to stop being raised. So basically that means the more offensive you are, the less defensive options you'll have. So it does help to prevent the whole teleport counter, teleport counter, teleport counter, teleport counter thing a bit, depending on how fast the gauge charges for some people. Because, as I said, when you're not attacking, it's charging. That does mean when you are getting attacked, it is charging. So, it's going to have a harder time, I think, to have really long combos because it's going to be fairly easy to break out of them pretty quickly.
Yeah, and also it also depends on how much you raise your defense stat, but I guess we'll get into that later.
Yeah. There is one thing I'll put onto this before people freak out and think combos are dead. You can. There was a move in the game called Lullaby Punch, which puts someone to sleep. And while you're asleep, I don't think you can react to someone attacking you at all. So, I think there'll be plenty of moves that will keep people from reacting to you. So, you might have to put a little bit more effort into setting up a really long combo. But I think that's how it should be, though. I think you should have to put in more effort to have a really long combo that can potentially just almost destroy someone's entire health bar, besides just knowing the buttons to put in. Opinion?
Mm, yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's nice that there are some defensive options, but what you had with some of the other games is people were sometimes very well trained in knowing exactly when to press their teleport button, and then it got really hard to hit them.
Yeah.
Really.
So it'll be a little limited. So it's possible. I mean, if you have more guard gauge than the person you're fighting, then good luck to them. But it'll it's hard to really predict how this will play out in the final game exactly. So
Yeah, especially because
with
we don't know all of the defensive options that you'll have. Or maybe we didn't know about any of the standard options that we have as far as that goes.
yeah, and then there's also what kind of supers would be. Like I said, there's a super that puts someone to
Hmm.
sleep. There could be other things that can slow people or stop them, or other things like that to keep them from moving. So it's. I think overall it'll probably work well. It felt good here at least. You did have times when you didn't feel like you were unhittable, but you didn't feel like you were helpless when someone was punching you, like in Battle of Z.
No, definitely not.
So that was part of it. In terms of the offense, your combos, well, they're not big complicated chains like in Budokai 3, and they're even not as you can't chain them as well as you can in Raging Blast either. But
No,
you
Raging Blast combos, they were as far as that went. It felt very responsive whenever you pressed, I think, triangle during your square combo. In this, I've noticed that there is a difference, but it wasn't quite as obvious, at least at first. After a while, I started seeing a few patterns, but I wasn't able to figure it out before the period ended.
Well, I found one thing I could do, which was basically, oh, what was it? Oh, right. So if I hit square, I think 5 times, and then I hit triangle, and then if you hit triangle 3 times, I punch him a bit, kick him, and knock him away. But if I only hit it twice, and then I use one of my melee supers, I could chain it like seamlessly between all three of those things. So that was a pretty nice combo. I mean, it wasn't really complicated, but it was certainly better than Battle of Z when you actually have options of what to do with your combos.
Instead of you have one button for melee.
Yeah.
Good luck.
So there was also the combos would be nice. I think it says we sound like it's simple and everything, but like I said, they didn't explain the controls, and we didn't have to really figure this out and get into it. I'd need a training dummy, just something to stand there and let me beat on it with infinite health, so I can just explore and have fun and stuff like that. Without
Or just a
that,
training mode.
yeah, without that, it's hard to really try to figure stuff out. You can do it a little bit, but it feels like whenever I try a combo about 3 times, I end up killing the person I'm fighting. I have to like start all over again. And then you have your allies come in and push them away or something like that. So
Yeah, or they just keep running away. I've had a few of those matches where I just couldn't get a grip on whoever I was following.
and when I did 1v1, just like against the AI, it would be really good at defense in that case. So it was hard to get a chain going. So it was hard to figure out how extensive combos will actually be, but it certainly felt better. Like there's just like that combo I mentioned already, and then there's also one if I just hit triangle and then hit square, I do this knock him away, knock him away, teleport, knock him into the ground thing. Uh, so there's at least options with what you can do with your combo, and they weren't necessarily really extensive, but depending on how the final game is with certain supers and maybe different fighting styles and things that you can have, the combos you might be able to string something together in the end. So,
Yeah,
that's
it definitely has potential. It has a lot, there's a lot more going for it than you had in Battle of Z, that's for sure.
oh, by far. Which brings us to the key attacks. Now, these are fairly simple. Although the thing I liked about it is if you held the button down, you just rapid fired them. So
That's true.
I felt that felt nice. Yeah, shooting key actually felt really nice and fluid in this game. I know that sounds kind of weird, but if you
They
play
weren't
it,
like this really small, nothing blast that you had in Raging Blast 1. They were just good, not good sizable blasts, and that was fun.
Although
So good.
I forget. They didn't actually take your key gauge either, which is an important thing. They're basically just a long-range attack your character has access to. I forget if they gave
Pretty
you
much.
key if you hit with them though.
Oh, I can't remember that either.
Um,
I didn't pay attention to that.
Neither did I. Maybe one of the videos I have running while we're talking shows it one way or the other. But the other thing I want to mention is Raditz had some key blast he fired out that was slow, but if it hit you, it would paralyze you. And it wasn't a super because I played as Raditz and used every one of his supers. It wasn't there. Um, Maybe I might have missed it from the ultimate list. But as far as I can
Maybe.
tell, he had some way of firing something that I couldn't figure out how.
Maybe you can do a charge shot if you guard.
No,
Guard.
that's
That's
throw.
a throw, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
So this was puzzling to me. I actually played as Raditz a few times to try to figure it out, and I couldn't do it. Now that I think about it, maybe I should have looked at his ultimate list a little more carefully. But he might have only had the one ultimate attack. It's the problem with not having the game to check. But
Yeah.
yeah, so he had some like charged key attack thing that I could not figure out how to fire. And seeing things like that don't upset me as much in a beta because I'm assuming in the final game it will explain to me how it is. And I actually like seeing stuff like that in a beta because it shows me that there's more to the game than I'm being presented with and that I know.
That's true. I mean, one of my first, when I first started, I had no clue what I was doing, and as I said, I had trouble finding the ascend and descend button. So I was already dreading that this was maybe like the early Budokai games where you just need to lock onto an opponent and the altitude is determined by that. But then one time I was
No, it's
just
much
playing with
worse.
someone who did know how you play, and one of our allies went down. He went down to go heal that ally, and I was like, okay, so he can and go down manually and go resurrect an ally who is downed. So you see, it had a lot of options that you didn't know were there.
Yeah. So that's I think it'll be I think that no one really knows everything you can do in the game right now, combat wise. So it'll be when the final game comes out or like a more complete beta. I think I read somewhere that they might put out another beta or a demo or something closer to release. I don't have a source on that, so it might not be true at all. Um, but yeah, so we may get to explore more later on with it. But in terms of supers, basically how the controls for super works is you hold down R2, and then on the side of the screen it pops up with four face buttons, and it tells you what each super is going to be. There were a lot of different supers that they put into this beta, and each one actually was different. So it wasn't just like every beam was the same. For example, uh, God,
The standard one you had was a spread shot.
yeah, you had a spread shot, and if I try to say this, I'm going to pronounce it the Hawaiian way because my brain is just hardwired to do that. So I'm sorry, but I'm sure you've probably figured this out for you by now. Is that I cannot separate the syllables properly as a Japanese word. So the Kamehameha, I know, was chargeable, and the double Sunday just fired off instantly, and it wasn't chargeable at all. So even
Yeah, what else was there? There was
even the
also
even the two
mhm.
beams, even just the two regular beams they had in the game were different from each other in that manner. Um,
Which one were they? The Kamehameha and
Double
a
Sunday,
different one? Or
double
Double
Sunday.
Sunday? Oh yeah, that was like a double beam, right?
Well, it was a little bit wider, or maybe not, but the it didn't charge it, but it fired off really fast, while the other one was delayed because you could charge it.
Okay.
So it started off with a little bit of a charge, so it didn't just fire off as quickly.
Yeah. Then there were like stuff like Vegeta's attack that killed Kui.
Yeah.
I never really got that to work well, but
Well, you fire it off and it hits something, and then after a short delay, it explodes. So
yeah, I just never got that to hit anyone.
you
But it might
had.
just be me learning how to use the game.
Well, I got it a few times, and it did pretty good damage. It was. You basically trade off the travel time on it for having for having the delay where it lands. Because it pretty much hits the target instantly. I mean, there's like no travel time on it at all. You just fire it off and it's exploding on something. S-
Mm,
the
any more basic supers that we tried?
Well, I didn't try all of them, sadly. But the melee
Oh,
ones.
right, there was one. What was that? It's basically like firing a standard key shot or a charged key shot, but
Oh,
it
that
also
one.
has you move to the left or right before you fire it.
Yeah,
That was an
yeah,
interesting
yeah.
one.
That was a nice evasive one, a way of firing and then moving out of the way. There was also a charged one, which I thought might have been the Raditz thing, but he doesn't have that super. So, but basically, it's the ability to just charge up a key blast and fire it. I know that sounds uninteresting, but you can't charge a key blast normally, so this is how you get a charged key blast. And at least the way my character fired it was pretty cool, so at least fun to use.
Hmm. Speaking of things that you can do normally,
Well,
you
we'll
wanna?
get to that one in a second. I want to do the melee
Okay,
ones
okay,
first.
okay, that's fine.
I want to do the melee ones before we get there. So, the melee ones were also pretty varied. You had a charge that was basically, essentially, when I used it, I just felt like I was doing a Shoryuken, which was fun. For those of you who do not play Street Fighter, it was basically just a punch straight up into the air. Which was good if your opponent is directly above you. You could jump right, jump right at him and punch him that way. You had one. The one you start with is one where if you keep pressing the button, you keep attacking, which of course I saw spammed all the time. Uh,
Yeah, it was the first thing that I really knew how to land properly. Mainly because you can just link it into
yeah,
punching.
you can pretty much use a super while doing a combo whenever you want. So the melee attacks chain into the physical chain. The melee supers chain into your regular combos easily and fluidly, which is always nice. The one I ended up using the most though was one where you'd kick them up into the air, teleport, and then kick them into the side away. Mostly because it looked cool, but so, I mean, let's be honest. There's going to be a lot of that, and what is the point if you're not having fun with your character's attacks?
It's a Dragon Ball Z game.
Yeah. So there was also one I liked a little bit because it would just charge straight at your opponent. Uh, for reasons.
I don't think I tried that, but I know what the reason would be.
Oh, we are foreshadowing this, aren't we?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. It's our biggest complaint about the game that we'll cover when we're talking about our complaints. Um. So yeah, there was a lot of nice supers. There was one that was a little head scratching though. um,
It's one of
basically,
those things that we've seen in Dragon Ball games
except burst
since
limit,
Budokai 1, maybe even before that. Something that we've always been able to
Hyperdimension had
do.
it.
Hyperdimension had it.
Yeah,
Final Bout had it as well, but Hyperdimension's older than that.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure the older games had it too. It's charging key.
yeah. This is the head scratching one. You actually have to equip a super that allows you to charge ki, and the one you could get here was horrible.
It was really
Just
slow.
awful. It was just painfully slow with how it charged.
there was like no point in doing it because you could punch someone twice and get more ki than you'd get after like 10 or 15 seconds of charging. I mean, it was bad. It was just really bad.
Better versions of it, so
Yeah,
worth it.
there might
And
be from some videos that we'll cover a little bit later that have come out. There, it looks like there'll be stronger versions of it, but
and then there's the fact that they work well with transformations, probably.
yeah. We'll get into transformations shortly. So that's
Okay.
mostly it for the supers. The key charging one is definitely head scratching. I can see if you look at the button layout, if you've played it, you can kind of see where would it go. They kind of ran out of space.
Yeah.
The main thing is, this is kind of funny how this works, is it's basically you have consumable items you can use in battle, and there's not much to say here, they're just consumable items that heal you, essentially. If you replace that button with key charging, you'd pretty much use what you'd use that button for anyway, which would be using it for key and health items. I mean, you'd lose the health items then, which would kind of screw Namek's passive over. So, it's kind of like, where do you put things? I think is the main problem. They wanted to put it in, but they couldn't map it to anything because they wanted the
select button.
to select, but that'd just be awkward to push though. Although they could put the scouter on select, that probably would have worked better, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't even remember how you used that.
I think you hit left on the D-pad. Or was it right?
Yeah.
Well, it was one of the D-pad buttons. I'm pretty sure
D-pad did
one of the
some things.
D-pad things was... I think the one that gave you the mission summary was rather useless, in my opinion. I can't think of a...
Yeah.
Unless missions get really complicated later in the game, I can't see how that would be needed.
No,
And-
because it just uses up all of the screen. I mean, it's transparent, but
Yeah, and it doesn't pause it either,
Yeah.
so fighting's going on while you're looking at it. But there are downtimes in battles. I'll
That's true.
just mention this real quickly because I don't really know where else to fit it into the discussion. But they have battles that can take more than one battlefield. And I saw in the Japanese beta, they explained how to use the portals, and they removed it here because they didn't have the English text for it, but I would have at least liked to have the subtitle because it explained the buttons of how to use it. Took me 3 times playing that mission before I figured out you had to lock onto the portal.
yeah. And all the times you thought it was glitched.
Yeah, it was really weird because, as I said, they don't explain things to you, so it's just kind of like you walk up to they show the portal and you walk up to it and you expect to just interact with it. Wasn't how it worked, so, But unless they have it where there's like a lot of portals and things get really confusing later on with which battlefield you jump to and everything, that mission summary thing is... You could remove that for key charging, probably. And
Yeah.
just to keep it consistent with Raging Blast, I put it down on the D-pad, because that'd probably be where people would expect it at this point, so...
You don't need to move anyway if you're charging, so.
Yeah. So... Ultimates. Well, ultimates are from holding down L2 and R2, and... Well, they're ultimate attacks. They're not as flashy as the ones from the previous games, but I'm pretty sure the reason why they're not as flashy as the ones in the previous games is because because you have multiple people in the battle. You can't really have a long cutscene and have like 6 people all stop playing at the same time because you hit your ultimate on someone.
Nope, there's real-time cutscenes and they're small.
They're small and
That's pretty much it.
you can be hit while you're charging up and things too, so you're not safe while doing it. You can't be knocked out of it, but you can be hit. That being said, the ultimates do hurt.
They do hurt. The explosions and the beams, they're all big and flashy as far as that goes, so
You
It's
can
not like
you
they
can
look
you can
terrible.
definitely tell the difference between someone using a super and someone using an ultimate. It's not as flashy, but there is a difference. Which brings us to the next ultimate attack, transformations.
Yes.
Transformations are ultimates in this game. Yes. We've seen video of it, so we've seen video of how it works, and saw Goku transform, and while transformed, your ki is draining.
This is a weird thing,
This is
really.
this is going back to Budokai 1 and 2 territory.
Yeah, sort of. And yeah, you are actually wasting slots on transformation. So if you want multiple transformations on your character,
Well, we don't
you're
know that.
going
We
to.
don't know that for sure. You might just have a transformation option, and then you
Mhm.
can like for Goku, you have a transformation, and then you can go Super Saiyan, and Super Saiyan 2, and Super Saiyan 3.
It's possible, of course. I was more thinking that
It,
Super Saiyan 3 and Super Saiyan 2 would be like separate transformations, but that you don't actually need to equip Super Saiyan 1 and 2 before you equip 3,
that's also
because
possible.
that would be stupid
Yeah, that
when
would.
you have three buttons.
Well, Dims has done that before.
Yes, they have.
Oh, poor Goku. Yeah, we don't know how it will work exactly. We know that it does take an ultimate slot. It does drain your ki. It does prevent you from getting ki from punching things, but it does not prevent ki from being gained while using your supercharge. So
Yeah, so that's where that comes into
you
play.
can use your super to extend your transformation time if you charge with it. It does. You still use ki while using supers and things. I'm assuming it's just kind of an all-around stat boost that you get, and then it drains your ki while using it.
Yeah,
That seems to be how it
um,
will work. This is
pretty much.
definitely a little weird with how it works. I mean, it feels like it's regressing a bit because in like every game since Budokai 2, basically your transformations have been you just transform and then you like get a new move set or a stat boost or whatever, and it's just there.
Hmm.
Well, in Budokai 3, you could be knocked out of it, but it wasn't like a natural thing. It came from the fighting.
Pretty much.
Here, eventually, you'll run out of ki and you'll revert. So that's, it's. I'm hesitant
It's
to say. I'm
different.
hesitant to say this is all bad. It will depend on how it works in the end, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I don't think it will be, well, it doesn't look like it will be that hard to maintain transformations as it was in Budokai 1 and 2.
No.
But still, uh, we'll have to see how this goes. Because there's also the question of transformations that are supposed to be permanent, how that would work with this system.
Yeah, when it comes to things like, for example, Frieza, how that plays into it.
In Budokai 1 and 2, you could actually knock Frieza out of his transformed states.
In
But
3, they were
yeah,
permanent. In 3, when you reached a point where you'd normally revert, he just stayed in the form.
yeah.
Same with a
And then
few
there's
other characters.
the question if they include characters such as, for example, BoJack, who loses his coat when he transforms, how would that work? But that's of course assuming
Magical
they put him
Kenshiro
in.
shirt magic?
Well, yeah, but Kenshiro always got his shirt back off screen. I'm not really sure how you do that in a game.
Yeah, I don't know. It's it would be a little weird. So, yeah,
Yeah,
the transformations are definitely something that will be interesting to see how they'll play out. And worst case scenario, they'll be useless. And you'll never want to use them.
but we
So,
haven't lost hope yet.
next thing is the biggest problem with the game. The biggest problem with the gameplay, and both of us agree on this, movement was awkward.
Really awkward.
Really awkward. To give you an example, when you're playing Raging Blast or BT3 or something, you lock on and you hit dash and you just dash towards who you're fighting. There's no ability to do that in this game. If you hit the dash button without actually while locked on and not holding a direction, you don't actually move. You have to push the joystick in a direction to dash. Now, if you're locked on, your dash will generally be in relation to them. So if you hit left or right, you'll start circling them and stuff like that. But
Sometimes.
But flying towards them, this is the problem. If you see someone dash towards an enemy and then like try to hit them and stop short or go past them, it's because the dashing is weird.
Yeah, I mean, in Raging Blast and such games, when you were directly dashing at someone, you could like charge an attack and wait for the exact moment when you were there. But in this, you have to time it much more. So I guess that will get better as time goes on and you get used to the system. But the major thing is dashing directly at your opponent is almost random, it seems.
Yeah, it's without that neutral dash. And this is something that's a little hard to describe because if it's one of those things where if you haven't played it, you might not have an idea of what it is. But if you play this and then play like Raging Blast, you can tell a clear difference about which one's better. And here, there's no neutral dash that just takes you towards your opponent, which means you're always having to hit forward, which means the chance of you going past them is very high. I've seen people dash past, I've seen people stop short. Dashing at someone and hitting them is really hard, and that should be a really basic thing to do in a game like this. The ability to do that is something you kind of need. And that's sort of why near the end of the beta, I found myself sitting back and just firing long-range attacks, because at least those would hit something.
Yeah, I had a lot of trouble with, but that's the thing with dashing. Most of the time, at least in the early parts when I was dashing, I just went past the character I was going towards. Especially if they were like at a lower plane than me, I would just go right over them. It didn't actually go towards them. It just went to the direction that I was dashing, not towards the character I was locked onto. And sometimes I think it's when you're moving first and then dashing, you do directly go to the character, but I'm not sure because it sometimes didn't do that. So it's weird. Let's keep it at that, maybe.
And speaking of weird, ascending and descending.
I think X is ascending,
This
if I
is
remember
this
correctly.
this is gonna be weird to explain the controls, and that is not a good statement to make. If you hold down
No.
X, you ascend. If you double tap X and hold on the second one, you descend. If you block and hit X, you descend. If you hit L3, you descend. None of these things, aside from X is up, none of these things are very self-explanatory or easy to really do.
There's I didn't even realize this, but there are three ways to descend.
Yes, there are 3 ways to descend and 1 to ascend. Apparently they figured that their descension was so weird that they had to have 3 different ways to do it so you could pick which one was the most comfortable for you.
So whenever you just start randomly pushing buttons, you'll get one of them right.
Basically. Yeah, I didn't like it at all. None of them, when
No.
you're flying around trying to fight someone, none of them feel right. Just none of them feel right. X to go up feels fine, but all the other ones
Yeah.
feel. You think the double tapping would be nice, but then the problem is if you screw up, you go up instead of down, and that causes a problem.
If your ally is dying at your feet, yes, then that really does provide a problem.
If you mess up the double tap a bit, because, that can happen at times. No matter how many times you do something, you'll screw it up at one point, so it's
We've
it's
seen it done easy in the past with like the R2, R1 and R2 for ascend and descend.
Well, it's been a number of things in the past, but it's usually been some combination of shoulder buttons. I
Yeah.
think BT3 might have been L2 and R2, or maybe I don't know. Maybe that was like two ones, and then Raging Blast was like L1 and L2.
There was something
Anyway.
self-explanatory once you got one of them.
Yeah, there was when you got one of them, the other one you could figure out easy enough. And since they were all shoulder buttons, it was easy to do while dashing with your X button. Uh, X being ascend is really weird. And by the way, the X is ascend and dash is L2. But remember, there's no neutral dash, so it's L2 and a direction causes you to dash. And the other problem with dashing is, like in Raging Blast, if you hit X, just neutral without the key charging, without the, Oh wait, no, that was BT. Ah, crap, I don't remember now. But basically, there was a way of going slow, a little bit faster, and then really fast. This just has slow and fast.
Pretty much.
So you just have slow
It's
and
awkward.
you just have slow and really fast. There are times when I'd want something in between the speed, and off the top of my head, I'm not sure how you'd map this, but I think part of it would be moving dash from L2 to X. I think that'd help a
that
lot.
would be that would be really easy.
I mean, I guess
I mean,
the
that would
problem.
pretty much change it to BT3 controls, I think.
Yeah, BT3 Raging Blast, they're basically the same in terms of
Yeah.
that. But the problem I see with that would be then you'd be dashing in melee combat when you're trying to like teleport or something. So of course you could possibly just map that to something else. Like
Yeah.
maybe block an X or something, or I don't know. It's just they might want to play around with the control mapping a bit. Is basically what I'm getting at. I might be able to get used to it, but it felt really awkward.
Or give an option to change.
Or give the
That'd be
option.
fine, too.
Yeah, that would also work. But I mean, the movement felt really awkward. So to end the gameplay on a good note instead of a bad one, as mentioned, your characters have the ability to sense powers or use a scouter. Basically, what this does is you can get the power level of the people in the fight, which is basically just an indication of basically how strong they are, what level they're at, and stuff like that. Nothing too big, but the other thing is you can use it to find hidden items. If you look around, there'll be little areas on the map, and if you fly towards them with your scouter on, you can then pick up a hidden item. So that might be an interesting system depending on what you can find.
Yeah, you found like item creation.
Yeah, I found something
Thingy.
that helped make me a healing item. So the other thing I want to mention is if your character has a scouter equipped, the color that you see when you use the scouter matches the color of the scouter, which is a nice, cool little detail.
Yeah. Couldn't you also see like power levels or something?
Yeah, you can see power levels. As far as I could tell, it just was basically an indication of the person's level.
But that's fun at least.
Yeah,
you
it's-
know,
it's fun.
It,
I mean,
it shows
it's-
it in a few.
It's fun
uh,
to like go on with your friends and see what each other's power level is and stuff like that. So, so that's mostly it for the gameplay. Unless you have something else to add.
No, not really. Nope. I think that's it.
Okay then. So now we'll come back to the character customization after you've made the character. And first is we'll talk about the clothing a bit. Yeah. Well, the
They
clothing
did.
had
It's.
something that annoyed me.
Are you talking about the color thing?
I'm talking
or-
about the color thing. When you buy, so I had a female character and I wanted them to have pants. This turned out to be more complicated than I have originally anticipated. The two pants options you had were Piccolo's pants and Goku's pants. Okay, so I picked Goku's pants and equipped them. And then I find out I can't change the color of them.
So now my outfit has to be orange to have it actually match. Ugh.
It's a bit of a downer.
So I noticed that the icons on the thing, so the ones that I started with had a multicolored icon. And the Goku pants had a solid color icon. So obviously that is telling me this I can change the color on and this I can't. I'm really hoping I'm really hoping that there are other, I'm pretty sure there will be other things you can change the color on. But that sucked.
I'm just hoping that there's maybe like a high level reward version of the clothes that you can change the color of.
Yeah, and hopefully there's one that's not a skirt.
Yeah, that's going to be tricky.
Yeah, I kind of want to know why they decided to do it that way.
The only thing I can really imagine is like I said, maybe there's like a high level version of the same clothing that you can change the color of. Otherwise, I have no clue why they would do it like this.
Yeah, it's really weird that you can't change it. I mean, I get it, like,
That's like the big thing. You can make your own character.
yeah, and then they limit
Yeah.
you in such a weird way. I mean, maybe it's a beta thing, but then why the two different icons? So that would lead towards not. I mean, maybe they'll change it for the final version. Maybe not. It's just, it left a bad feeling in my mouth that I wasn't able to change the colors of it.
Yeah.
So,
Now the original outfits you could change the colors, and
yeah.
as far as color changing went, it was more limited than Battle of Z had.
Well,
With you
yeah.
had like a bunch of preset colors.
Yeah, you had a bunch of
instead of
preset colors. In Battle of Z, it pretty much allowed you to make any color you want because it gave you a whole color slider and then like a hue and light.
Yep. So
You could pretty much make whatever
it's a
you
minor
wanted.
thing because you have a pretty
There's a
pretty
pretty
broad
wide range of
arrangement.
colors, so you can pretty much make anything you'd really want. And with things like that, I'm kind of on the fence because on the one hand, you can't make any color in the world. So, if you want it to be like 32 green instead of 31 green, you can do that. On the other hand, how much difference does that really make? And it gets a little bit harder to sync up your colors with if you have to do everything by number. Well, I shouldn't say harder. It's a little more annoying because you have to like write
Yeah.
down or memorize what each number was in order to match it up. Where here you just look at where it is and you put it there. I don't think it'll be a big deal, mostly because they give you so many colors.
Yeah, it won't be much of a deal. It's just something I felt like mentioning because I did notice it when
Yeah.
I was making it. Like, it's a little more restrictive, but I can live with this.
Yeah, it should work out fine. Sticking with the clothing, Namex. Oh boy, Namex.
Right.
So I have to ask a question for everyone here. Have you ever seen a Namex foot? Well, if you played this game, the answer is still no. Unlike with the Saiyans, if you unequip their foot gear, they apparently still have shoes on. And if you
It's
unequip
kind of a weird thing,
their
but-
pants, they still have pants on. You can see their legs, although I recommend no one actually doing this because it gave me nightmares. If you get the Raditz pants and you equip those, then you'll see their legs, but I wouldn't recommend it.
You also see them with a tail.
Yeah, the Raditz armor had the tail built into the armor, so Namex had a Saiyan tail then, which was weird.
Even more strange is that the Frieza's race, they can also equip the Raditz pants.
Nothing quite like
With
nothing
tail.
quite like Frieza with a tail to turn into a giant horned monkey. I don't know.
Giant horned monkey.
Well, yeah, they got horns. Make a
Oh,
weird.
that's a what if form that would be cool. Dragon Ball Heroes, get on that.
So the other thing about clothing, which we talked about a little bit, so I don't know how much time we'll spend here, is that clothing has stats associated with it. So this gets back to the min-maxing versus aesthetics thing. So, do you have a difference of opinion with the clothing having stats compared to the race?
Um, on one hand, if I kind of like it as you can actually get better equipment, and it's kind of an RPG trope as far as that goes. But sometimes you just want something that looks nice, you know,
Yeah. I'm sort of the
or
same
something that,
way.
that something that looks like your character.
I think, I think with the racial differences and the stats, which we'll talk about soon, I don't think the clothing needed to have statistical changes on them. I think just the clothing, I think just the race and your stats would have been enough. And then let people dress how they want.
Mhm. No, no, that would pretty much have been enough.
Because
Just
there will
yeah.
come a point to where, like you said, if they have a different version of the starting clothing, um, if it is different and you don't like the new look, you'll have to accept that you're taking a statistical hit in order to not take it, and that leaves a bitter pill in people's mouths.
Yeah.
I'd be able to accept the racial differences and have each race be different because I go, okay, that's kind of cool. You know, then each race isn't the same. But then the clothing having differences, I think that is a much bigger deal for a game like this. I mean, in an RPG, you kind of go along with it because it's an RPG and that's part of it, but this is mostly a fighting game, and how your character looks, I think, is a much bigger deal here than it would be in an RPG.
No, that I yeah, I agree with
I
that.
think your character's identity here is much more tied to how you look. While in an RPG, getting the high level equipment and equipping it is like a status thing that I don't think needs to exist in this game.
Even then, I didn't really notice much of a difference with different equipment.
I did a little bit, but that's because I had almost the entire Raditz set on, and that gives a
Yeah, and they
huge
seem
boost
to.
to your physical damage to the point where my throws was doing more damage than my throws were doing more damage than my supers. Plus, also I was raising my melee attack, so that probably played into it too. But my throws were wrecking face at the end. I was taking like a fifth of their HP with a throw, which is brutal. So I think it will have an effect. It might be a multiplicative effect, which is it's instead of just giving like this adds this much to stat, it's like this modifies your stat this much.
That will make it interesting at least.
I have no proof of this. It would require a lot of testing to actually figure that out, but that's something that how it might work. So yeah. Anyway, so I think we've pretty much covered most of the things about clothing. So leveling up. So you had six stats: health, ki, guard, melee super attack, ki super attack, and just melee damage. They're pretty much self-explanatory.
Yeah, pretty
The only
much.
ones that require a
But
little bit more explanation are key and guard, because key extends how big your key gauge is, and guard makes your guard gauge bigger. That's basically that explanation.
yeah,
So yeah, it's interesting though that they split the defensive stat from health into just. I mean, health is there's one defense stat which is health, kind of guard too, but not in the same way. So you basically have health, but then the attack stat is split into three things.
so you have this weird divide between you have just if you want to be a defensive character, you have one stat to worry
Yeah.
about. But if you are an offensive character, okay, do I go with my standard melee attacks? Do I go with my melee supers? Do I go with my key supers? So it really makes you wonder how they're going to balance this out. Are the stat boosts for attack upgrades just going to be that much bigger?
It's yeah, this is going to be something to look at in terms of how stats work exactly. And since I'm a complete nerd about figuring stuff like this out, I will be figuring it out. So, but other than that, there's not much to say. There are noticeable differences when you raise it, and whenever you level up, you get 3 points, and each level doesn't add that much, I'd say, but it gets noticeable. I think I had like 24 in my attack stat on the end, and like I said, my throws were doing a lot of damage. So I got to a point where my supers and even like my ultimate weren't doing all that much, and I was just better off punching things. So it becomes very noticeable.
Yeah, yeah, I went with the same path, so unfortunately I can't really comment on what the effect on key attacks would be.
Well, I'm assuming it would make your ultimate just destroy people.
It's always fun.
In terms of super customization, you have 4 supers and, well, you had 2 ultimates and then 1 defensive move. The defensive move goes in the ultimate slot, and then 1 that was grayed out and you couldn't pick. So there's a few ways you can take this. 4 supers, that gives you... There's a lot of supers you can equip, as we talked about earlier, and you're free to equip them however you want. I will mention I like how Kaioken was a super, so you can just give that to everyone. Every race can equip Kaioken, which is nice. Because that's how it should be. So, yeah, I don't know. Were any supers that were race restricted?
I can't remember. I don't think they were.
I don't think there were anyway. Some clothing was race restricted, but
Yeah, that was.
yeah. I don't think any
The
super
ultimates?
ultimate was though. No.
Well, so you had 2 ultimate attacks that you could equip, and then one defensive move, and so it's basically allowing you 8 moves, which is nice. So
It's a lot more than we've had in the past.
Yeah, it's certainly is. It's no, it was Ultimate Tenkaichi 2.
Yeah.
Raging Blast had 4, and that was the first game where you could actually change your attacks. And Ultimate Tenkaichi put down to 2. And then this game, that's pretty much that. You know, counting PS2 and on games. I don't know much about before Budokai 1, honestly. So,
Yeah, it would probably be just, like Street Fighter combos to get supers done. Very different, at least.
so this super stuff is pretty good, and with how many different types of things I said, there's one that puts stuff to sleep, there's one that charges ki, there's a bunch of different ki attacks. Destructo Disc is unblockable, I'll mention that, just for the sake of doing it. So, attacks will have their own unique properties, and they're pretty varied. There's a Para Para Brothers
I was
dance.
pleasantly surprised by that. Oh, yes, the Para Brother dance.
Yeah, that, in case people are freaking out at that, it wasn't in the beta, it's on like sort of a rumored status right now, but we'll get into that a little bit later. It's just funny. Yeah, so you're gonna have a lot of options to have your character fight the way you want, really. And with as how I think it works with the grayed out option is I think one of the options that were grayed out was for your transformation. And since we didn't have it, it was grayed out. I think you will have. I think transformations will have their own slot on the ultimate selection thing. So I think that's why it was grayed out. I mean, I know it was circle here, and then on the video they showed it was triangle, but I don't know.
Or maybe it's something that you could put in any spot, so either your defensive or one of your offensive ultimates. We could do a lot of things with it.
Yeah, I just think it's... I believe that the ultimate will have the transformation will have its own slot because it was grayed out. Otherwise, why grayed out? Just have us have 3. So, the last thing about customization was a grayed out option on the beta, which was something that read Edit Forum Chat. I believe this name might have been mistranslated or written improperly, because that makes no sense at all.
But going,
Yeah, I'm speculating maybe it's like maybe you have like standard speech options. I don't know if you've ever tried this with, well, going back to Fantasy Star again, but in the game you had pretty much there were to the D-pad or the C stick you had some standard speech bubbles that you could configure. So if something went well, you would pick your standard Go Team option, for example. I think it might be different for different forms. Maybe that's what it means, but
the other
it's hard to say.
option, which is what I lean towards what it would be, although as I said, the name is so weird, is it's a way of actually customizing your transformation, which would be kind of the best case awesome scenario. Because it is listed under customize, which is where your stats and your clothing and your super attacks all are. I mean,
And
that's...
of course, aside from Super Saiyan, the other transformations will be a bit hard to have as a standard thing.
Yeah, I read somewhere, again, blanking on the source, I forget where it was, but I thought it said transformation slash boost. So even if your character doesn't transform, it seems like every character will have some form of power up at least. Which is kind of needed, really.
Mhm.
Because otherwise you just pick a Saiyan and go Super Saiyan, but every form, I think, needs some sort of unique power up that would be like Super Saiyan in order to actually, you know,
Be it unlocked potential or,
unlock
well, I'm
potential
hoping for
or
just,
some power up thing, or I don't know. But, you know, I think every race will probably have something that's akin to a transformation without actually necessarily being
I'm
one.
really hoping they get the Frieza's race, some transformations. I'm really hoping for that, but
Yeah, and if this is a way,
it'll be
if this
hard.
is a way to
And,
customize it, it'll be, sorry, it'll be nice to have the ability to customize it so you can actually pick how your transformation will look as a member of Frieza's race, because there's a lot of different looks for that, I could imagine. There's a lot of different ways you could have that go, considering how many forms Frieza had.
yep.
So now getting into some of the more down things on it. The stability of
You've mentioned a
this...
few down things
Yeah,
before,
but this
but
is going
you
to be
know,
pretty negative. The stability of it was just awful. The amount of times
yeah.
glitched, froze, just was loading a stage and then just stopped was very high. Now, I know it was just a test. I'm aware of that. And the point of the test was to probably try to fix these things. So it just felt, and I know there's a lot of time out there, and they are trying something new with the online city and everything. I just felt it was good to mention it, that it was a significant problem, because if anyone from Namco or whatever actually watches this or something like that, it was a problem and it needs to be looked at. I'm assuming
Yeah,
they...
you had times where
I'm ass-
where the screen just went black during loading and it froze on me. I think that happened twice actually.
froze on me, I think, 2 or 3 times. It stopped loading on me, which is it didn't actually freeze the system, but it would just stop loading the screen like 4 or 5 times, and it would crash in different places each time. It's always
I
seemed to
think you had
find
more
new
stability
ways.
problems than me, but yeah,
But you had a separate problem with the game.
I had a separate problem because I am from Europe, and I'm not sure if anyone heard of the problems going on the Europe side of things, but nobody was able to log in. Oh well, it took a really long
Yeah,
time.
I
So
think I was playing for about 2 hours before you got on.
yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, I tried it like a couple of times, but after a while, you start getting annoyed and you go do something else only to try it later. But then you find out that it still doesn't work, and eventually you discover, okay, if I hold this button, I don't actually have to keep pressing it. I don't have to repeatedly press it. I can just keep holding it. So I try experimenting with. I try finding heavy things on my desk to put on the button, so it automatically tries to log on every time. And eventually I did get
In
in.
the offline city.
in the offline city because that's the first
Yeah.
option. So when I'm automatically keeping it pressed in, of course, that's the thing it's going to pick for me. Um, and yeah, eventually, of course, it glitches, so I get to experience all that over again. But I have to say, during at the halfway point, I think of this testing, they
It got
took out the service for an hour-long
yeah.
maintenance, and they got rid of most of the problems. I mean, at least on day two, I tried logging in, and I think I just got in from the first try,
It
and
was
it didn't crash, I
there
think,
were
after that.
I it still had I don't know if it froze on me after the maintenance, but it still screwed up a few times, but I think it did get a little bit better. Um, but yeah, I'm not gonna hold it against the game or say this game is gonna be riddled with these problems, but I do think on a test like this, since this is what they're testing, it's important to mention that it was an issue and it would impact things a lot if they don't get significantly better. So that's why we're mentioning it. Staying on this negative list, mission rewards. Oh boy.
Oh, yeah, mission rewards and the way the bonus things in missions activate.
Okay, so for example, on as I said, I had most of the Raditz armor. The reason why I didn't have all of it was because I didn't get it. How you got it, as far as I could tell, was you had to beat Gohan on that stage. How does Gohan show up? Apparently, from the description, it's supposed to have something to do with keeping Raditz's health up, but I did that. Most of the time I did it, his health was over 50%, and Gohan just sort of popped in whenever he felt like it. I tried beating him with throws, I tried beating him with supers, I tried beating him with ultimates. I've tried like almost every combination I could think of beating them, and I still have no idea what triggered Gohan. It feels like it was either glitched or random, neither of which is very good. Uh, and the problem with this is, as I said, you had to beat Gohan to get a chance to have him drop the Raditz armor. And then it was only a chance of which piece he'd drop. You could get duplicate pieces. It was a mess. Basically, if you look at the mission rewards, that's just a list of what you can get, not what you will get. And it just randomly picks it. And then, as I said, it is tied to things you do, which is you had like having to beat Gohan to get the Raditz armor and like I think his ultimate attack and things like that. It's just it becomes a grind eventually, and that's not good.
Nope. Although it does keep it interesting, maybe to try it at higher difficulty levels. Maybe then the chance of getting it increases even.
Was there a difficulty
But yeah,
selection?
we can tell. There was well, it wasn't in the version we had. You could, but there were. I don't know if you remember this, but if you selected your mission, you could pick it on different stars. But you only had one option, but
So we'll see. You know, it
it's at
might get better, but that really was annoying. Not as annoying as the next point I'm about to bring up, though. This is a problem that has the potential of really killing the game. It's pretty serious, which is you can't invite people to join your lobbies or your parties from your friends lists. And by your friend list, I mean your PSN or Xbox or Steam friend list or whatever. We couldn't do a direct invite to each other, which made meeting up and playing extra annoying.
there's an option to search for players in game. But yeah, it's different from how it usually
You can
works.
search for players, but that doesn't necessarily mean your friend's going to be on that list, which is the problem. For example, I was the party leader during all this, and it was easy to search for me because you'd search for party leaders, and that limited the list a lot.
Mhm.
So you search for female Saiyan party leaders, and I'd be there. If I searched for them for free, whoever I was searching for, they wouldn't. Most of the time, they would not be on that list.
Now it just pretty much caps out at some
Yeah,
point.
it just caps out at some point, and it just gets to be like
the point of playing a game online is to play with your friends. So this is something they really need to look into fixing and adding in, because making it annoying to play with your friends will drive people crazy. It just will.
Yeah. I mean, it might be fixed in a later version because, of course, it's just a network
Yeah,
test, so
it might not. It might not have
maybe it's
just
not
been
built in yet.
implemented yet or something like that. Yeah, yeah, I'm aware of that, but again, you have to mention these things.
Yeah, I know, I know.
So, I'm not gonna start saying the game won't have this or it's gonna suck or anything like this, but it's worth mentioning that this didn't have it, so you got to make it clear that it needs it. But in general, getting to their closing thoughts on the gameplay, it was definitely good. I mean, we ended on that little negative note at the end there, but overall, I had a fun time playing it.
No, so did I. I mean, we make fun of Battle of Z, but I like the general concept of it, of allowing more characters to be in a single fight. Because I always thought it was a bit weird how in the previous games you had like teams of 5 people, but they just patiently wait their turns before they get into the action.
Yeah.
So I like that it takes that same concept, only with fewer people, so you have a much clearer view of what's going on, and also there are a lot more options in combat itself, so it makes the combat itself just a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it looked very promising, and with what we've seen that just wasn't here, it looks like it's going to be a lot better. You can't tell, obviously, off of this, but it definitely didn't turn me off for the game. If anything, it made me want to see where things are going to go more, and hopefully it will keep up with. Hopefully, it'll keep up with the standard that I think it can be.
That would be nice. One thing I want to mention about this game is the missions that we had. I liked those missions because they weren't like the standard where the good guys were going to fight the bad guys.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point that we completely forgot on, which is the mission I was talking
Yeah.
about, which is basically your character teams up with Raditz to kill Goku and Piccolo.
Yeah, and then if you do it well good enough, I'm not sure
However,
how you make Gohan appear. Gohan appears as some sort of secret boss character, and his stats are way above Goku and Piccolo's.
because it's supposed to be his higher power level at the time thing.
Yeah, but
He
that's
also
just
makes the
something
funniest
unique that
whine I've ever heard.
it's Japanese, and he just yells. And there's no subtitles.
No, there's no subtitles. Oh.
But that's something that I haven't really seen before, I think, where Gohan is the big bad in your mission that you need to defeat. Kid Gohan,
Complete
I
with
mean.
his Dragon Ball hat outfit too.
Yeah.
So
So, that's fun. That's an original angle to a battle we've all seen before.
yeah, I think also seeing what missions you'll be able to have will be a fun thing too. So one last thing before we end this, which is
We've been going on for a while.
yeah, there's a lot to talk about this time. There was some data mining done, and they found some character files, and there's a lot of GT stuff here. Like a lot.
That is true.
It's starting to look like, with the amount of GT stuff that has been found through data mining, it's looking like GT characters are going to be in the game.
Woo.
He's not very excited. I'm more neutral on it, so
I'm pretty much indifferent to
Yeah.
it. I wouldn't have cared if they weren't in there, but they're in, so whatever. It's more
I
content.
don't really hate GT characters, so
I hate some GT characters.
well, I hate some characters.
There's a
from everything.
Para brother dance.
There's a Para brother dance. Yeah, apparently one of the data mine super attacks was a Para brother dance. So there's that.
Yeah.
other random character that was found was Jocko.
Yeah, there's a super attack for what was it? The universe's best
Oh, they
patrolman or
also
something. So it's obviously going to be
they
Jocko
also found
from
him
the
in the
recent.
character files too.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he's pretty much confirmed, sort of.
Sort of. I mean, it's
Yeah,
data mined,
kinda.
so it could just be leftover data that they're not following up on. So
Okay, but just to be clear, Jocko is like the character that Jocko the Patrolman, the final manga that Akira Toriyama did. He's from that, and that comic leads into Dragon Ball. So that's where he's from.
I wish they'd put in Nekomajin too, but
That's a bit older, and it's very much a gag manga. Not to say
but
Dragon Ball wasn't comedic, but
he did interact with Goku though, so
he was Goku's
yes,
student.
he was Goku's
But
student, so he'd have a reason to be in a game. So
who knows? We haven't seen the final list.
yeah, we haven't seen the final list yet, and if he's in the game, it would be beyond awesome. So, but yeah, we've got on for an hour and a half now.
Yeah.
I think we've pretty much covered everything in more detail than we probably needed. Got off on a lot of tangents. So, yeah, I think we're good.
Okay.
So, hopefully, we'll see more exciting news on this game in the future soon.
It has the potential to not suck, so let's hope it won't.
All right. See you later.